At 7:15 am, Jack pulled up to a local diner where workers and locals frequently ate breakfast. He took a seat in the second booth along the window facing the front door. A longtime waitress, Nora Whitfield, took his order of eggs over medium, bacon, and wheat toast. At 7:40 am, Sheriff Harold Briggs entered the diner alongside two deputies, Deputy Vance, an older officer, and Deputy Ryan Cole, a 26-year-old rookie whose chest-mounted body camera was the only one switched on. After exchanging pleasantries with patrons, Briggs walked up to Jack's booth. He tapped the tabletop and demanded that Jack move to the counter, declaring that the booth was his usual spot every morning. Jack calmly declined, explaining that he had arrived early, been seated by the waitress, served his food, and intended to finish his meal. When Briggs pressed further, hinting at how things worked in Cedar Ridge, Jack noted that the table was unreserved and available to any customer. When Jack asked on what legal grounds he was being made to stand, Briggs immediately declared Jack was obstructing justice and observing the sheriff's department across the street. Jack kept his hands flat on the table, stating clearly to the entire room that he was unarmed, was not refusing to identify himself, and that his wallet was in his right jacket pocket. Jack stood and placed his hands behind his back. Briggs tightly cuffed Jack's wrists and hauled him out to the parking lot, while 40 silent customers watched without intervening. Outside in the parking lot, Briggs bragged to nearby citizens about taking down a suspicious stranger who had refused orders. Deputy Ryan Cole kept his chest camera running, despite Deputy Vance's objection to wasting battery life on a minor dispute. At 8:00 am, the cell phone in Jack's jacket pocket began ringing as his mandatory hourly check-in call was missed. Briggs ignored the ringing phone, allowing it to go to voicemail 3 times 31 miles away. The protective detail tracked the missed check-in calls and noticed Jack's location ping had remained unmoving for 11 minutes. Within 90 seconds, the agents rolled out, backed shortly by an additional team dispatched from the state capitol. At 8:35 am, 3 unmarked black SUVs entered Cedar Ridge, blocking off the diner's driveway. 9 federal agents stepped out, led by Special Agent Caroline Hayes and Agent Doug Prescott. When Agent Hayes announced she was looking for Director Jack Sullivan, Sheriff Briggs initially laughed, pointing to the man in handcuffs behind his patrol car and claiming he had arrested him for obstruction. Agent Prescott held up official credentials and announced to the entire crowd that the handcuffed man was Director Jack Sullivan, head of the FBI. As shock washed over the crowd, Briggs's face pale and stunned, he claimed Jack had no identification. Jack reminded the crowd that he had informed the sheriff where his wallet was, but Briggs had refused to check it. When Agent Hayes requested the cuff keys, Jack instructed that the handcuffs remain on until the scene was thoroughly documented from every angle. For 11 minutes, the FBI director remained in handcuffs in the diner lot, while agents took photographs, documented vehicle positions, and recorded the names of all present witnesses. Federal agents immediately secured the scene and seized crucial evidence. They served papers on the sheriff's department across the street and confiscated the outdoor security camera feeds. They secured the diner's register video feed with Nora Whitfield's signed consent. They seized Deputy Ryan Cole's body camera footage, which captured the entire incident inside and outside the diner. A local patron, Dale Hutchkins, came forward to hand over 22 seconds of video recorded secretly from under his table. Back inside his office, Briggs attempted to file a retroactive report, claiming Jack had been physically combative, unaware that the system access was locked down at 9:40 am, trapping his falsified narrative under federal seal time-stamped just 25 minutes after creation. Seeing the federal presence, local citizens began coming forward to report past abuses. Thomas Garrett, a hardware store manager who had been held for 19 hours over a broken taillight in 2019 without formal charges and had his tools taken from his truck bed. a local woman who had been pulled over 5 times in a single month without cause, a business owner who was threatened on an unlit road regarding his liquor license. Federal investigators reviewed 19 years of departmental records, discovering 14 arrest reports altered after filing, 6 records changed by more than 4 hours, 11 arrests over 7 years conducted without charging documents or prosecutor notification, evidence inventories showing inconsistent cash amounts, 9 excessive force complaints dismissed by the county prosecutor's office without opening investigation files. By 3:15 p.m., Ellis Warner, chairman of the County Board of Commissioners, served Sheriff Briggs with an emergency suspension order issued by the state attorney general. Briggs surrendered his service weapon, commission card, and unpinned his badge, placing it on the hood of his patrol cruiser. He was officially informed he was the subject of a federal civil rights investigation. When Agent Hayes asked Jack why he did not reveal his identity sooner to avoid the arrest, Jack explained that he wanted to personally experience the reality faced by ordinary citizens who had written letters to his office. He noted that if he had revealed his identity immediately, the department would have issued a clean report and apology, leaving 19 years of systemic abuse unchecked. 2 days later, Jack confronted Briggs on the steps of the department building. When Briggs argued that none of this would have occurred had Jack simply moved to another table, Jack emphasized that the department's downfall was not caused by arresting an FBI director, but by 2 decades of altering records, seizing property, and confusing personal pride with the rule of law. Following the investigation, the Department of Justice and the FBI jointly indicted Harold Briggs and Deputy Martin Vance on multiple counts of civil rights violations, record falsification, and conspiracy. Deputy Vance resigned prior to being served. The county appointed 26-year-old Deputy Ryan Cole as acting sheriff, citing his decision to keep his body camera recording throughout the entire incident. Mandatory reforms were enacted, continuous body camera logging uploading directly to county servers, mandatory prosecutor notification within 6 hours of any hold, and an outside review board featuring citizen members, including Thomas Garrett. 17 days after his arrest, Jack Sullivan returned to Cedar Ridge in his rental car at 6:45 a.m. He walked back into the diner and sat in the second booth along the window. When he walked in, every patron in the diner stood up in silent respect. Nora Whitfield served him his usual breakfast, and Jack ate his full meal before leaving cash on the table, leaving Cedar Ridge behind to continue his work elsewhere. The morning mist usually settled low over the creek behind the hardware store, but on the morning Jack Sullivan returned to Washington, the air was sharp and clear. The brick buildings along Main Street appeared unchanged on the surface, yet an undeniable shift had occurred within the town's daily rhythm. Cedar Ridge was no longer a place defined by unwritten rules enforced from the front seat of a patrol car. It was a community forced to confront 2 decades of deliberate silence. In the days following the initial federal indictments, the town hall became the focal point of Cedar Ridge's transformation. What began as a single line of 9 residents in the parking lot grew into a steady stream of citizens stepping into the small conference room on the 2nd floor. Special Agent Caroline Hayes and her team remained on site, recording statements that detailed the subtle ways power had been misused over 19 years. It was not merely the large incidents, the overnight holds, or the missing property that dominated the testimonies. It was the accumulated weight of minor infractions, unjustified speed traps set up outside specific local businesses, unofficial curfews suggested to teenagers sitting on park benches, the silent understanding that appealing a parking violation at county court would result in increased scrutiny during late-night drives home. The records retrieved from the tan building across from the diner provided the structural evidence needed to corroborate these accounts. Forensic auditors from the Bureau's field office spent 120 continuous hours cross-referencing dispatch logs with physical arrest jackets. They discovered that the department's off-site storage locker contained over 40 uncatalogued items, ranging from personal electronics to hand tools, all logged under a single vague categorization: held for identification. The Department of Justice, working alongside state prosecutors, systematically dismantled the structure that had allowed the department to operate without oversight for nearly 20 years. The legal proceedings moved along 3 distinct tracks. The grand jury returned a multi-count indictment targeting former Sheriff Harold Briggs and former Deputy Martin Vance. The charges centered around deprivation of civil rights under color of law, specifically citing 7 distinct incidents where individuals were detained beyond statutory limits without access to counsel or formal presentation before a magistrate. Falsification of official records. Documentation showing that altered timestamps were systematically used to cover delays between initial traffic stops and official booking times. Conspiracy. Establishing that senior department personnel intentionally bypassed standard evidence logging procedures to suppress complaints. The burden of implementing these sweeping changes fell upon Ryan Cole, the 26-year-old former deputy who had been appointed acting sheriff. Cole's position was unique. He was simultaneously a primary witness for the prosecution and the chief administrative officer responsible for restoring order to the precinct. During his first formal staff meeting with the remaining 4 deputies, Cole did not offer an inspiring speech. Instead, he placed a copy of the new departmental operating procedures on the center table alongside 4 brand-new body camera units. He made it clear that adherence to policy was no longer subject to interpretation or internal loyalty. For Cole, the shift was deeply personal. He understood that the uniform he wore carried a history of public distrust that would take years to overcome. His decision to keep his camera running during the diner incident had preserved the crucial evidence required to hold Briggs accountable. But he recognized that single act did not absolve the department of its past failures. By the 3rd week, the atmosphere in Cedar Ridge began to stabilize into a new reality. The diner on Main Street continued to open at 6 a.m. every morning. Nora Whitfield kept the coffee pot moving between the counters and the window booths, but the conversation inside had changed. People no longer checked the door with subtle anxiety when a patrol car pulled up outside. The second booth along the window, the site of the original confrontation, remained unreserved, yet it was no longer treated as the exclusive territory of an unquestioned authority. Customers sat there, ate their meals, and looked out at a town that had finally begun the quiet work of holding itself accountable. The story of Cedar Ridge was not one of a dramatic rescue, nor was it defined by a single afternoon of federal intervention. It was defined by what happened after the black SUVs drove away. A community learning that safety does not require the sacrifice of basic civil liberties, and that silence in the face of small injustices eventually costs a town its integrity. Thank you so much for watching today's story. If this video touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Solo Dad Stories for more touching tales about family, dignity, and second chances. Let us know in the comments below which moment stayed with you the most. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.